Hey, Brett Bolzenthal here at eXp Realty, and today I'm featuring David with Radon Specialists of Wisconsin in our spotlight. And David is the leading expert in Northeast Wisconsin on radon. This guy pretty much knows everything there is to know, and I'd like to...
Hope so.
Yeah, right. So David, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background with it and how you got started and where you're at today with what you do with Radon Specialists.
Yeah, well, the long story short is I kind of fell into it. I had another business that I sold, and when I started looking for work, I took a job with another local plumbing company, and part of what they did was Radon Systems. And when I went through the interview process, they asked me, what do you know about radon? And at that time, it was nothing. And they said, well, that's all right, we'll train you. So I went to school on how to sell, or how the radon systems are supposed to work and get certified. So they luckily paid for that. And then after they kind of decided to stop doing residential work, I was going to be looking for a job, and my boss said, you really should do radon because you actually know what you're talking about. And so I said, yeah, that'd be a good idea. Didn't really want to start another business, but you know, I thought that versus getting another job, I would delve into it. When I started, my goal was to do 2 systems a week and not have any employees and just be able to survive on that. And now we're doing, 1,500 systems a year.
1,500 systems a year.
Yeah.
And not just in the Fox Valley, you cover a pretty good portion of Wisconsin.
We have an office in Menominee Falls also, and that covers the Milwaukee area. The goal is to do 2,000, and with the housing market right now, a lot of people think we'd be busier, but we're actually slower because a lot of people aren't asking for radon testing because they're afraid to lose the house that they're bidding on. So, and same thing with inspections. So once the market actually cools down, we'll probably get to 2,000.
Right, and that brings up a very good point. There is a radon testing contingency in our offer to purchase, but as you mentioned, a lot of people are bypassing that because they're afraid of losing out on the deal, where just because you didn't do the test now doesn't mean you should skip it later.
Do it after you move in.
Now, it's true that radon is said to be the second leading cause of lung cancer?
Yeah, there's smoking, and then there's radon gas. Lung cancer is also linked to leukemia. And now they're also doing studies on possible of being linked to Alzheimer's disease because, again, if you breathe it in and it decays while it's in your lungs, it's shooting off radiation. And so you're being radiated from the inside out. That's how it can cause lung cancer. And it changes your DNA and releases free radicals and all sorts of bad stuff. But what happens if it decays while it's in your nasal passage, while you're breathing it in? Well, what's next to your nasal passage? Your brain. And they've done autopsies on Alzheimer patients that, dedicated their body to science, and they have found higher levels of radon in their brains. So they're thinking there's a link. There's no definitive proof. I can't say there is. I'm just saying they're looking into that. But beyond reasonable doubt, lung cancer. Beyond reasonable doubt, certain kinds of leukemia.
Now you've pretty much set the parameters to which other people are going to be measured, based on your success and the amount of quality you put into your work and studies that have been conducted. You set the standards for the area.
That's right, Tim.
So, David, I'd like to give us a little bit of a run-through on your radon mitigation system and how this all works.
You bet, you bet. This was a display that we built like 14 years ago. So it's old, it's a beast, it's big, but it's really simple. Basic components of a radon system are a vent pipe going through a slab. This would be like your slab, rising up a foundation wall, and then going, I'm going to turn this, and then you'll see the pipe in the basement. It'll go through the rim joist, and then it'll come out into the garage, like over there. And then if you go to the garage and roof, the fan's going to be up in the garage attic space.
Okay.
Pipe's going to go through the roof, it vents above the roof, because you want to vent above the roof when you have a radon system. And just flipping it on, again, you'll see the U-tube here. So the side of the gauge, it's called a U-tube, it's a manometer. It basically measures airflow and resistance. It doesn't measure radon, which some people mistake it for. So once the system's activated, the side that's plugged into the pipe, that side's going to go above 0.
Oops.
And the other side's going to drop down below 0. So it's just a simple airflow gauge to show that the system's operating. Because the systems are very quiet. You might hear some air coming out of the pipe, but that's right here, because it's for display purposes.
Okay.
But if this system was an actual system, like we have in our shop back there, the pipe's going to go through the roof. You're not going to hear that noise inside the house. It's going to be silent. So that's why we have the gauge on the pipe to make sure that you can, from time to time, make sure the system's operating. You should still test every 2 years, even if the system's operating, just to make sure nothing changed with the foundation that you didn't notice, if a crack developed through the slab, some kind of leak developed that's short-circuiting your system. You want to make sure that that high radon doesn't return. Chances are it's not, as long as it's running, but again, the only way to find out is a test. You can't physically sense radon. You're not going to have a feeling that it's high or low. You got to do a test.
Right. So now that level there, once again, that doesn't actually tell you about the radon levels. It's talking about the fan, the vacuum that's coming out of there.
It tells you that your system's operating properly. Like if the fan was off, then the system would go 0-0 like this, would be flatlined. And then again, once the fan's running, then it's going to show an airflow. Put that back in there. So it's real simple technology. But this tells me the fan's operating. If this was a real system, I'd be at about 3/4 of an inch resistance. That would tell me I'm probably on gravel and or drain tile. That would tell me I'm moving about 100 CFM out of the pipe. That would tell me that the system's working really well. If the resistance was really low, like almost too low, I would know I have a major air leak somewhere that I have to find and caulk or seal to make sure I'm not sucking air out of the house. If the resistance was really high and at 2 inches maxed out, then I know I might have to use a larger fan like this. This is considered a high vacuum fan. So this would be a fan you would use in when you have clay or sand, or just a more high resistance area. This would be a fan, again, if you have a really low air resistance, or maybe you have a really big slab or something, you might get into a super high air volume fan that moves about 250 CFM instead of 150 CFM.
Okay.
So there's different fans for different jobs. 90% of the jobs we do are with that fan. It moves about 150 CFM. Most homes in our area have gravel, drain tile. Even the older houses, they might not have gravel, just clay.
Yep.
But they'll have an exterior drain tile system, and when you go off the sump pit, you're going to have low resistance, so you don't want to use the same thing.
Okay. Excellent.
Yep. And yeah, this is a flashing that sometimes in the winter time, this is a radon, professional radon monitor we use. When you see a monitor like this, you want to make sure that there's calibration dates, that you have a serial number on here. The serial number is actually here. We put it on the front so we can see it easier. If you see a monitor like this without a serial number on it and no calibration dates, chances are it's not calibrated, should not be used.
Yeah, because that could give out some pretty bad readings, right? They could be very inaccurate.
If a monitor is not calibrated, they tend to test high. And you want to make sure that you're getting an accurate result, you know. Especially in a real estate transaction, let's say it came in at 4.2 and it was the calibration, it hadn't been calibrated for 5 years. Well, I came in with my monitor that was calibrated, and there's always a little bit of variance, but let's say it came in at 3.7. You didn't have to pay for a system, but the other guy that used that monitor that wasn't calibrated, that was maybe on the high side for certain reasons, and that's why they're not calibrating them, you end up putting a system where maybe you didn't have to. So it's, I always tell people, buyer beware, you know, that you want to check for those things. But so that's an inside system. If I turn this, sorry about turning my back on you, but it weighs about 400 pounds. This is an outside system. Sometimes you have a detached garage. You can't route it through a closet, or you have a finished basement where there's just no way you're going to go through the garage without ripping stuff apart, which we don't want to do. We want to try to keep costs low and keep it simple for people. Then you go on the outside of the house, you'll have a fan outside. The electrical has to be hardwired, it has to be outside by the fan. There are new low voltage fans you can use, which if the local inspectors allow it, they can just run a little cord through the wall and it's plugged in the basement. And same kind of vacuum and everything, you don't have to do the wiring. This to me is still a better way to do it, because you have the switch right by the fan, which you really should have. And then, again, this is a display, but the vent pipe has to be a minimum 6 inches above the gutter or a foot above the roof if you go through the roof. You cannot have a fan inside the house. It has to be outside the house or up in an attic space. So if you see a system where the fan's in the basement, it's vented underneath the window, that's really a bad deal, because if that fan ever leaked, it wouldn't be 5 people curies coming out of the fan, it could be 1,000, because that's what's underneath the slab.
So that's pretty significant.
That's huge. And it could be a leak you don't even actually hear, because the molecule of radon is so small. And even if it didn't leak on the fan side, if you're venting it underneath the window or next to a door to inside the house, and let's say in the summertime you have your windows open and your front door open, you have a screen on it, the vacuum effect of the house as it breathes is sucking that air right in. If you have a breeze going through your house and you have a pipe like this vented underneath the window or something, that stuff come out of that pipe and go right into the house. So you may have low radon in the basement, but you have ultra high rate concentrations coming into the house.
Wow.
You don't want to be exposed to that. There's reasons why the standards are in place. Whether you call it a moisture system, or a soil gas extraction, or a radon system, whatever it is, if you're sucking air from the soil, from this foundation that's underneath the foundation of a home, these systems have to be installed a certain way to protect the person inside that house.
Oh, fantastic. Now, a lot of houses deal with, whether it's older home or new construction, there's some other benefits there when it comes to moisture issues you might see?
Absolutely. Home, again, homes with sand or clay underneath the slab, it's harder to really affect it a lot. If they have a drain tile, it will definitely help more. But when you have a home with gravel and drain tile, especially new construction, an active system installed to make sure there's no radon in the house when you move in is going to pretty much guarantee a low radon level, but it's also going to help with moisture because most of your moisture, even in the wintertime, is rising from the basement. And so if you ventilate the home properly, especially where the home's being really tight, and you're pulling that out, it's going to help the dehumidifier run less in the summertime, it's going to help get moisture off the windows in the wintertime. We've installed systems for people that had moisture issues in the winter. Nothing else would solve the problem. A whole house dehumidifiers and very expensive equipment. We put a radon system in, and lo and behold, the moisture in the windows disappeared.
Wow,
So,
we see a lot of that ice buildup and moisture building up all along the edges.
So it
on
makes
there.
a huge difference. I was going to point out too, if you see a system through the garage, these little devices that are on the pipe, this is called the fire collar. You need it at the wall and the ceiling. No matter what, if there's a separation of the wall or ceiling between, the garage and house, we put them on the systems. They're like $25 devices. Basically, long story short, if there's a fire in the garage, that fire collar will collapse the pipe and fill the hole with fire retardant material and make sure that fire doesn't spread into the dried wood on the other side of that drywall, whereas you wake up, with a fire under your feet, something like that. So these collars can save a life, can save a house. The fire might burn out in the garage, but if it can get through, once that pipe collapses and melts, if that fire got into that dried wood, it's going to spread extremely quickly. Versus if it's hitting that drywall and hitting that fire collar and it just doesn't have anything else to burn, it could burn out and you'd have a little bit of damage in the garage, but that's it. So it's very important to have these fire collars on the piping. It's not a building code, it is a fire code. There's different codes for different things in your home. So if someone says you don't need it because it's not a building code, they're right. It's a fire code. You need it on there for the fire code.
Oh, that's valuable information.
Yes.
Now, the tubing that you generally use for this, obviously there are different competitors out there that might use something to cut back on costs, do things a little bit cheaper, but you don't cut back on quality.
Yeah, I don't want callbacks. The second we go back to home, we're losing money. And one thing that I see a lot out there is Schedule 20 piping. This is mainly used for drain piping, like when you bury it underneath ground. This is a Schedule 40 pipe. You can see the difference.
Yeah.
So this can get real brittle in the wintertime and break real easy, crack real easy. So what if it cracked near your window? Again, you're leaking high concentrations of radon through that pipe. This is virtually never going to crack outside unless you really hit it with something hard. It's just going to stand up over time. It's better quality. It's going to be a quieter system versus this. This is just a good way to cut costs and put in a cheaper system. We want to make sure that everything we do from top to bottom is super above board.